Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast with me, Karen Maloney. I am your host, and the intention of this podcast is to help us open our minds, get curious about ourselves, and to raise our vibration and consciousness levels. Through these conversations, we hope that you will go on an inward journey to discover the truth of who you are and to become aware of your own energy and vibration. We have the power to consciously create our lives, but we need to wake up to this fact before we can begin the process and learn the key of self-responsibility. Check out the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Acast, Castbox, or whatever platform you listen on, and please like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Leave a review, leave a rating, as this will help it to reach more people. Check out my website as well, Soul Power Light, www.soulpowerlight.com. Hello everybody and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. It is me, Karen Maloney, and I am delighted to have you join again for this conversation, which is super fascinating and evolves around plant medicine and the benefits and expanded states of consciousness. And I was really excited to connect with Jonathan, as this is a conversation I've wanted to have for a while. But before we get into that, just a reminder for anyone who is looking for support in making changes in their lives and connecting back to the truth of who they are, in expanding their own consciousness, looking at their own beliefs, their conditioning. I have some slots available for one-to-one coaching. So pop me an email, karen@soulpowerlight.com, and we can jump on a free call and explore different avenues for you. So reach out, don't be shy, karen@soulpowerlight.com, or log on to my website, soulpowerlight.com, and connect with me there. So back to today's guest, and Jonathan DePotter is the founder of Behold Retreats, a bespoke wellness provider that facilitates life-changing plant medicine journeys to explore your inner world, discover your truth, and live to your full potential. Jonathan is passionate about raising awareness on the benefits of plant medicine like ayahuasca and psilocybin and its potential to improve well-being and raise consciousness. Jonathan has spent most of his career in the corporate world in client service, delivering strategy and transformation programs for clients across Asia Pacific. After a number of years in New Zealand, Jonathan moved to Hong Kong to work with Accenture and most recently lived in Bangkok as country manager for the boutique consulting firm Capco. Jonathan felt that despite an objectively great life, good friends, and career success, something intangible was missing. As a result, he took a sabbatical year to travel through South America, where he attended his first ayahuasca plant medicine retreat in Peru. The experience was transformational, and in his expanded state of consciousness, Jonathan was shown directly the mindsets and behaviors that were keeping him from reaching his potential. Returning to the corporate world, Jonathan was surprised to find that he was more patient, empathetic, and productive than ever before, and began in-depth research into the world of plant medicine and facilitating retreats. So, as mentioned, this is a conversation I've been wanting to have for a while, and I was delighted to connect with Jonathan, who founded Behold Retreats, and talk about ayahuasca mainly, and we touch on psilocybin at the end, but he talks about his own experience, what shifted for him, and also he talks about ayahuasca and what it is exactly and why it is such a complex medicine. He talks about the benefits, how it helps us to recalibrate our mind, how it dampens down the default mode network, and how it can elevate our consciousness and, as a result, increase clarity in thinking, cognition, have more sense of purpose and belonging, improve your mood and behavior and overall life satisfaction, improved relationship with yourself and others, overall improvement in well-being, more patient, empathetic, productive, and also connected to the bigger picture and more motivated to take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So just these are some of the benefits of elevating your consciousness. And again, plant medicine is one option to do that, but again, there are a multitude of paths that can support you in helping to elevate your consciousness and to make shifts within yourself. And Jonathan also touches on the subconscious mind and the subconscious programming that we all pick up and how negative it is. So a super fascinating conversation, lots to take from it. And if you want to find out more about Jonathan's work, you can go to his website, behold-retreats.com. That's behold-retreats.com. But as always, I will have everything linked on my website, soulpowerlight.com, and click the podcast section. Enjoy. Welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in and joining me for another episode. And this week I have Jonathan DePotter joining me. So first of all, you're very welcome, Jonathan.
Great to be here, Karen. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I'm super excited to have the conversation today. You are the founder of Behold Retreats, and you are helping others and working consciously with the likes of ayahuasca and psilocybin, which we will get into in a bit, and different plant medicines, which I think is incredible. But maybe first set the scene for us, or what is your background, or what led you to working with the plant medicines?
Yeah, so I'll start actually all the way back. So I grew up in Hawaii with super alternative kind of hippie parents, if I may describe them as such. And that really led me to rejecting all things spiritual or alternative or new age very early in life. And so lo and behold, I joined the corporate world and worked in management consulting for many years. At Accenture in Hong Kong, and then subsequently establishing a different consulting firm in Thailand. And about 5 years ago now, I had the opportunity, after 5 years in Hong Kong, I was chasing the corporate dream, right? Chasing partner promotion. I was chasing new clients, new deals. I was kind of on that hamster wheel. And one morning, I remember looking at myself in the mirror and going, is this it? Like, I had a good life, right? I had great friends and, everything that you could ask for in a modern, objectively successful life. But I was like, is this it? It just didn't feel right. Something didn't feel right. And I didn't know what I was looking for. So I took a year off and traveled through South America for the majority of that year. And during that period, I wound up at a ayahuasca retreat with two friends of mine. And that was transformational. It was a very challenging experience, certainly one of the most challenging of my life, if not the most challenging. But it really opened the door for me to spirituality, to our true nature. It was just kind of the first step in what has become a much longer journey for me with plant medicine.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, and your background of your parents as well, and growing up in that kind of alternative lifestyle, for want of a better word, and then completely rejecting it. I wonder, how do you look in your parents' lifestyle now?
It's been incredible. It's a humbling return, right? It's a
they were on the money.
An acknowledgement. They were on the money, absolutely. And it's not easy for any child to admit that to their parents.
Yeah, but again, that's the beauty of the journey as well. And our path is our path, and having that from such a young age, potentially led you down the corporate path, and nearly the opposite. And I can definitely relate as well to that question, of, is this it? I remember being in my old job as well in events management, and I'm like, outwardly, yes, I'm ticking boxes or whatever, but that feeling of, is this it? And that's can be quite an existential crisis question. But I love how as well you took a year off. You decided to do something about it, which I think is pretty incredible as well, because often people just keep going. It's like, well, of course it is, and they don't allow that curiosity and allow themselves to explore. So I think that's super as well. And again, obviously there was a reason. So when you mention ayahuasca as well, maybe for listeners who mightn't be familiar with it, would you explain a little bit about ayahuasca and what exactly it is?
Yeah, so my curiosity was first piqued by witnessing a transformation of a friend when I was 21, and she was about that age as well. Ayahuasca is a brew from Central and South America made of two plants that generally grow actually quite a distance from one another. So there's a little bit of wow around the fact that these two plants found their way together and then to be brewed in a very specific way in order to make ayahuasca. There's 3 different types of ayahuasca vine, black, red, and yellow, and then often the various traditions that exist throughout Central and South America often actually combine them with 3rd and sometimes even 4th plants. So you get quite a high variety of ayahuasca, as it were. And the medicine itself is incredibly complex, right? So it's made up of 463 compounds, which is, super, super complex, which is why it still hasn't quite made its way into modern science, which tends to have more of a, shall we say, obsession with compound isolation, which doesn't really necessarily benefit us the most. So this is a very ancient, complex medicine with, linkage to all of the traditions there that persist through Central and South America.
Amazing. And I think it's a word that's becoming more popular, but again, there's that perception of it being a drug. And oh my God, it's a drug. What's your, like you've mentioned the word medicine, and for me as well, it absolutely is a medicine. But what do you say to people who come with the idea of, oh, it's just another drug, or you just want to go and bliss out, or whatever the word is, zone out, and just have this night of tripping or process? It's a great question to ask. And, I would say, honestly speaking, that plant medicine or psychedelics as a category, the substances themselves are actually neutral, right? So yes, you are going to have a psychedelic, or you're going to have an experience. Let's say that. What's important is actually the context and the intention that sit behind the use, right? So if you are taking this very seriously and have the intention to use this to heal some of the limiting beliefs and past trauma, which we all have, and you're using this to create your future self and your reality, and bring forward your best future, if you might describe it as such, then the plant medicine is going to respond in kind, right? But if you're just taking this to have a bit of fun and see what happens, then equally the plant medicine is going to return in kind. It's not necessarily going to reward you in as deep of ways as is possible. And I know that sounds like a little bit trite, but we're entering the subjective, the spiritual, and the post-rational in entering this work, which I never would have believed in personally. But all of that stuff is absolutely there. And so, intention and the level of consciousness and what you're bringing to the table is all important in relation to working with these medicines. Yeah, I love that you say that. And yes, for some people it may sound a bit strange, but that's the power of it as well, and the power of nature. It is a consciousness in and of itself. And like you say, if you go with the right context and intention, it is really powerful in how it can support you. And I'm curious as well to know what shifted for you in your first experience, and in general. I know you mentioned trauma and limiting beliefs, but in general, what are some of the benefits for people as well?
Yeah, sure. So I might start just by setting the context for your typical Western brain. Your typical Western brain is highly compartmentalized. Generally speaking, we were traumatized as children, right? We've got this intergenerational trauma dynamic that plays out, and people generally say, "Oh, not me. I've got perfect, loving parents," and as I do and as I did, and yet there are experiences almost universally that we experience that we have in early childhood that we have suppressed and repressed away from our waking consciousness. Now, those experiences have taken hold in our minds and our bodies, and they have played a significant role in shaping our character. So those experiences manifest in our character. And for me personally, I was often impatient. I was quick to frustration, even sometimes anger, and I didn't really understand where that stuff was coming from, honestly speaking. And so. The second dynamic is just overwhelm, right? It's such a complex world. We've got so much stimulus. We've got so many things competing for our attention. And so our brain starts to take shortcuts as we try to engage at the level of complexity of the world that surrounds us. And so these adaptive shortcuts sound good, but they actually start to do damage to the software of the brain. We can begin to lose our neuroplasticity. And the third dynamic is what's generally described as the default mode network, which is kind of our public enemy number one in our brain. And a default mode network is responsible for all thoughts which are related to self, which for the majority of us are about 100% of thoughts, as it turns out. The National Science Foundation in the US has done research to show that your average person has between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Generally speaking, close to 100% of those are about yourself. 90% of those are repetitive. 95% of those are repetitive, and 85% of those are negative. So we only think about ourselves. We think of the same things, and we think negatively. And this stuff. And this
I'm just like laughing, going, "Oh, yes."
and so often this is so deeply entrenched that we don't even see it. So people hear that statistic and they go, "Oh, that's so sad, not me."
Yeah.
But every time, but even when you say, "Oh, I should have done this," that's a judgment, and it's a negative judgment about yourself. And we do that all the time. And then as people become more aware of this, they often spin into a cycle because they are guilty about their self-judgment. And that also can lead to second order problems, which is like, no, whatever is playing out as your experience is really beautiful. It's the important bit is to, establish more metacognition so that you can see your thoughts and be kind to yourself and laugh and love yourself as you're having these repetitive negative thoughts about self. So I just wanted to kind of set that context before we can talk about the actual benefits.
Actually very, very important context to set. And I was laughing there to myself as well. And like you say, I had many insights and revelations as well. And that thing of, you said like it's so unconscious we don't see it. I know there was so many times I nearly like face planted myself going, "Oh my God, how could I be so blind to this?" But that's the thing, like you're talking about, it's subconscious programming. Like we're not aware of it. It is things that we've picked up in childhood from society, from peers, from family, culture, education, religion, you name it. We all have them. And it's really insightful. So thank you for setting that. And even like you mentioned, the judgments. I remember I never thought I was actually because I always wanted to improve. I was always into self-improvement as well. And I thought by judging myself, I was helping myself to improve. But it's so counterintuitive. Anytime we judge, like, no, it does not work. So thank you for setting that. Yes.
Absolutely. And, one of my mentors, she's really helped me incredibly. And she always says, well, you're having a thought, right? And we identify with our thoughts, right? We think that that's us. We think that they're real, and they're not real. They're just thoughts. And so every time that we have a negative thought, we can just say, "Oh, look at that. I'm having a thought. Thank you very much. Thank you very much."
Yeah. And I get it. I get it for someone who maybe hasn't done subconscious work, whether it's through plant medicine or other things, it can sound a bit insane to be like, what do you mean I can see my thought, or I can question my thought, or I don't have to believe my thought? It's kind of like, nah, because I was there as well. So I can completely understand that. But absolutely, that is the work, and there is another way, 100%.
Absolutely. And that's, our minds are kind of, a calibration of an antenna. And so our thoughts are just a reflection of that calibration. So as we further calibrate the antenna, then the quality of thoughts improves, and the quantum of thoughts reduces exponentially. I no longer have thoughts unless I'm asking for them.
Yeah, amazing.
So benefits. Yeah, so I guess I won't go too deep into the science unless you want to dig deeper, but ultimately plant medicine dampens down this default mode network, which for many people is a first ever experience of having a dampened default mode network. And so that allows a massive reconciliation between parts of the brain that normally don't exchange information. You can see this within an MRI machine. And so interestingly, if you take someone with 20 or 30 years meditation practice and put them in an MRI machine, it's this really beautiful image where you can see all parts of the brain are talking to all other parts of the brain. modern Western brain, say from the business world or, just average brain, is highly compartmentalized, and the flow of information is very limited to a small subset of the neural pathways. So these plant medicines dampen down this default mode network, allow this massive reconciliation and information exchange, which is, ultimately thought to be at the core of the benefits themselves and also the sustained benefits. So a lot of, incongruent thinking or thoughts that are at odds with one another that have been physically stored within the brain have to be reconciled. And so the example that I often give, because it's, one that's pervasive in the modern world, is, if you've got some guy who claims to love his wife and at the same time he is cheating on his wife, those two things are an example of a physically compartmentalized brain, right? Those are two thoughts that are coexisting, that are not compatible. And so as you have these experiences, those things need to come up and be reconciled one way or the other. So that's, I think, in essence, that is one of the primary benefits. The real goal, what we are doing different with Behold retreats, is to focus on elevation in consciousness, not as some sort of abstract subject, but really as something that can be measured, and we can go into that a little bit if you're interested. Levels of consciousness absolutely can be measured and calibrated, and so we focus very much on trying to prepare people for an experience so that they elevate their consciousness massively, and they're able, as much as possible, to sustain that over the period ahead as they return to everyday life. So, that elevated consciousness, in my mind, is what's responsible for all of the other benefits that are being proven by science. They're a byproduct of an elevated consciousness. And those are clarity of thinking, cognition, sense of purpose and belonging, mood and behavior, life satisfaction, improved relationship to self and others. It's pretty much just about everything, health and well-being. And so it's like, oh, wow, this looks a bit like a silver bullet. And it's like, yes, because through elevating your consciousness, you are just becoming healthier. You are more motivated to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yes, I am all about consciousness. I love it. And I can't remember who said or what book I was reading recently, but it's like consciousness is the only real reality.
100%.
Everything is consciousness, and everything has a consciousness. And again, the more that we connect to our own consciousness, the more that we can connect and recognize the consciousness in others and in every other thing, which is beautiful. But again, you mentioned the word there as well, and it's funny you mentioned it because I had written down just in my sheet a couple of moments before that, but it is silver bullet. And again, I think a lot of people, and I've seen it happen as well, where people go into plant medicine ceremonies or whatever it is, in any way in life, we're kind of taught this thing of silver bullet, this is going to be the end to all my problems, all my worries. And yes, there is huge potential, but again, people don't see the piece that they play as well, and that element of self-responsibility and doing the work. So what is, you mentioned you help people to best prepare for the ceremony or going to one of the retreats, but what as well is, in your mind and from your experience, one of the most crucial things for even afterwards to make sure that it's not just an experience that they expect going, oh yes, all my problems are solved, and then they go back and they're like, what? So what is the piece, that self-responsibility piece as well?
Yeah. I'm so pleased that you asked that question. And I think I'll set the context by saying the typical customer journey for entering the plant medicine world, which reflects that of my friends and so many hundreds of others that I've spoken to, is that you go to one of these retreats, as I did. You excuse my French, but you have your head blown off. And then your life returns back to normal. And that's exactly what happened to me. And then you go, well, I had this really profound experience where I was taught so much. Now I need to go on another retreat to open that door again. And then again, your life returns to normal. And so it's very easy to get into a pattern where you're having these really profound experiences and then your life returns to normal. And that's really not it. That's really not the purpose of plant medicine.
Can I just ask you something on that? When you say return to normal, do you feel like it actually returned to normal, or did it feel like normal, but there was something even more pervasive within yourself, or that question of, is this it? Or did you feel any kind of bigger sense of, or maybe like even more anxiety, or even like more stressed or frustrated because like that, you know, you had this really profound experience and then you just felt like drop back into normality, but with a different sense, or no?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it raised so many questions, right? I was deep down the path of atheism, right?
Okay.
And so it was.
You really
it was just
rejected
so
it
many
all.
questions. Yeah, I really did. And so reading all the books and everything. So it was. It really. It put me in a position where I had to answer a lot of questions. And so I wouldn't say there was any sort of a dip in terms of quality of life, but definitely I think it re-energized a curiosity and a zest for life that had waned a little bit over my years in the corporate world. And so, you know, I didn't want to be one of those people that quickly jumps into the plant medicine world. I wanted to take the time to really do my own work, to understand the topic more deeply, the research, et cetera, ahead of moving into, you know, the quote unquote so-called industry. And so that's been, you know, and I'm pleased that I did that. But it left me in a position where I was just like, there's something here that the world could benefit from recognizing.
And what was that?
Spirituality, you know, taking guidance from spirit, taking guidance from heart, taking guidance from body rather than mind orientation. That's ultimately it. I wouldn't have recognized that, you know, after my first retreat experience. But this is plant medicine, I think, represents a bit of a fast track to reconnecting mind, body, heart, and soul within our essence, and then also, you know, reestablishing our cellular health, which is so lost for many of us given diet and lifestyle and many other things, and then also reestablishing connection with source. Right, religion is ever present, but you know, often we've lost our own individual connection, and we're now relying upon others' connection, which and I think what these plants can do is really connect us to our own divinity and our own source energies.
Yeah, so powerful. Yes, love that. And I suppose then again, just to touch on the element of us taking the reins though as well, because I think, you know, like you're saying, it's a really profound experience, and it really does give that, you know, you mentioned head blown off. You can really have that sense and that total reconnection, and like that, seeing all the unconscious, seeing, you know, your limiting beliefs, your thoughts, your patterns, how you've been like buying into all your thoughts, and now seeing that, oh, they're just a thought and there's so much more to you beyond the egoic and beyond the material and beyond who you've been operating as, you know, like you say, that portal, that door has been opened to spirituality, to divinity, to consciousness, to source, to everything that is. But then, like you say, and I know for me, one of the crucial parts, and if any friend or anyone asks about plant medicines or that, it's always the integration and what we decide to do afterwards. Because again, we can have this huge opening, but like you mentioned as well, it can go back to normal if we don't kind of take the reins and run with it. So what maybe for you was really important in that process afterwards, or what do you do in your retreats to support people afterwards to make sure that they, I suppose, harness and really cultivate this new connection and new way of being?
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked again. And I think, so what we generally do for our clients is 3 weeks of preparation before a retreat, a 1 week retreat, and then 3 weeks of integration after a retreat. And so the 3 weeks before are focused upon, what is your dream reality? What is what is it that you would like to manifest in your life in terms of health, relationships, passion for work, abundance, all those dimensions to life, and helping people get really clear on what they're bringing into their reality. And then also to help people understand where they're at, right? So often people go into one of these retreats with, high level intention, like I want to open my heart or reconnect my spiritual connection. And, that's fine. But when we take the time and the energy to understand ourselves more deeply going into one of these retreats, we're able to set intentions in a much deeper way. And so working with coaches who have seen thousands of clients, we've all got our own little me story, right? Which is, oh no, you don't understand. It's like, trust, anyone who's worked with thousands of clients is like, yeah, I get it. Don't worry.
You begin to see there's not so many patterns.
Exactly. There's like 5 or 6, life patterns, and and you fit almost squarely into everyone fits almost squarely into one of them. And so, an expert coach can really help you corner your own ego so that you can really see what's playing out for what it is and why you are inviting some of those patterns back into your life on a repetitive basis. And, as we've shifted to that model for our business, it's been really rewarding to see the clients to have breakthroughs even ahead of attending the retreat, right? Because, the people who've worked with plant medicine, you can bet that they've done their own work. And so by virtue of having done their own work, they're pretty uniquely placed to help others really, really get there and to set really meaningful intentions, right? And so once you've understood some of the limitations that you're placing on yourself, you can begin to do some of the mental and emotional processing ahead of a retreat so that your retreat experience is actually a lot more positive and a lot less painful, right? Because in the retreat, these plants do amplify whatever's going on in the subconscious. So even just being aware of what's going on in the subconscious and having those tools available to you so that you can navigate the experience. So instead of, quote unquote, blasting off into wherever the plant medicine experience might take you, you can actually play a more active role in being like, hey, these are the things that I'd like to bring into this experience so that we can work on these together. And equally, this is my future reality, right? This is who I'm going to be in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. And then the plant medicine can really respond in kind and be like, look, here's all the things that you need to know if that's who you're going to be in this period of time. And it's like, wow, okay, here comes the downloads, right? Better get your notepad ready because here it comes. And so it's possible, it's possible for people, rather than spending years and tens of thousands of dollars like I did, bouncing around at these different so-called 5-star retreat centers, it's possible for people to actually make massive progress in a short space of time if they're being expertly guided from a coaching perspective and with really high quality practitioners.
Yes, I agree totally. And, you mentioned there as well, expert practitioners. And I think that's a huge area as well, because I know, well, maybe not with COVID so much, but definitely ayahuasca was like becoming a trend and there was huge commercialization of it and like ayahuasca tourism and all these kind of things and maybe not best practices and whatnot. And I think because you're in, a really vulnerable position as well, that it is super important to know and to feel comfortable with who you're doing it with. So maybe you'd like to speak on the practitioner side of things and the importance and the role that they play as well.
Yeah. This is it's such a sensitive space, and what I will share here is without any sort of a judgment, right? Because pretty much, I don't want to say 100%, but the overwhelming majority of people that are working in this space are doing so with the most of heartfelt intentions, right? They really have their heart in the right place. However, that doesn't mean that they necessarily have all of the skills that would be required to do this work very well. And so what I always encourage people to do to find their way to a really high quality experience is not just to ask your friend, oh, did you have a good experience? Yeah, I had a great experience. It was amazing. That is not necessarily what you're looking for. That is the norm, right? That is base level understanding. What you're looking for is people who have had transformative experiences, right? Where they have made massive improvements to their quality of life and the quality of experience, right? Because that reflects a sustained elevated consciousness. And so for me personally, I thought I was making massive progress over those 3.5 years where I was attending all these retreats, but I wasn't. I made way more progress in the space of weeks working with experts than I did in the 3.5 years prior. So focus in on the quality of life of an individual and the change that has gone on over a period of time, rather than on, it was a really amazing retreat or a really amazing ceremony. That's really not it. And so unfortunately, there's just a short supply of expert practitioners in the space. The people who do this work at the highest level are doing energetic work, right? So they're able to channel the energies through your body and through your mind so that you are actually releasing at an appropriate rate the trauma and the limiting beliefs and all of those sorts of things, so that you can actually come out of that with a sustained elevated state of consciousness. Now, I don't have statistics because, this is such a nascent industry, but I would guess the percentage of people who can do that work well in this ecosystem is less than 1%, which is really unfortunate.
I don't know. I'd be slightly more optimistic, especially, if you're going with genuine shamans and things like that. But yes, I absolutely agree where you're coming from as well, because I've seen people who, after one or two ceremonies are like, yeah, I'd love to work with the medicine. I could do this. And it's kind of like, no, because I've seen experiences as well where people have gone through a really bad time. And that's when you really want to know those people are skilled and capable. And I've seen them as well step in and I'm like, shit, they know their stuff. Like it's no game either. Like you say, it's all about the intention in the first place. If you're just going in for the crack and having a laugh, that's not really the right intention. Yeah. If you're going in with a specific intention and you're really ready for change and want to do the work and want to show up and want the support of the medicine, it is there to support. But again, you need the people around you just in case, because it can be really intense, so it's not something to just be messing around with. And that's why I say as well, it's a sacred medicine. It is a medicine, and nature is so powerful. We just need to bow down. We think we are all powerful and we are it, but we are nothing without nature. And
one dynamic I would share is that how to word this politely, generally speaking, the shamans are working with animistic or energies of the earth. And that can represent a broad spectrum of energy. There's great beauty in that. And that was what I felt drawn towards when I started this work. But there are also, I would say, some drawbacks in that framework. And often, for Westerners, it's often cosmologically challenging, right? The shamanic traditions are operating under a completely different context and framework from your Westerner, and so that can bring its own challenges in of itself, because you're really bringing two very different worlds together, which may not exactly align with the pure. If we just take the individual who's flown down from New York City to Peru, that might not necessarily be exactly what's entirely in their interests, is being kind of bombarded with a new cosmology.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it does to me. I totally get that as well. And yes, I do believe that, because it is a different, and I've met people as well who work specifically with the Western culture and Western society as well, because we are different, because we have grown up, the majority of us, completely disconnected from nature and spirituality and our emotional body. We live completely in the physical, rational mind and the material world and, our mental mind. So it does need to be tailored slightly as well, I think, to that demographic. So no, I completely get where you're coming from. But then speaking on society as well, and especially when, you came from such a high-level corporate background, and I know you target a lot of kind of corporate level executives as well for this work. What do you see the benefits and what they can bring back to the corporate culture from doing this kind of work?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple different dynamics to it. I think that quite a number of people will potentially select to leave the corporate world once they've done this work, because there tends to be experiences that come with that lead people closer to their soul's calling, if we may call it that. But I also think that there are, there's certainly some people that I know that have been really, motivated to change the corporate world as they've gone back, right? Yep. Which is really beautiful. And equally to go out and start their own businesses. So, the way that I look at it is that the focus is upon elevating consciousness. And with that, people naturally become more patient. They naturally become more empathetic, more productive. And so there are benefits to them as individuals, as well as to their quote unquote performance in the business world. But ultimately, their motivations begin to shift away from the emotions that are a reflection of lower levels of consciousness, which are so common in this world, like envy and pride and fear, and towards emotions that are more benevolent, right? So their motivations are more about helping others and serving others, and how they can do that, and how they can ultimately, preserve our beautiful little planet for future generations.
Yeah, love that. And I know we've been kind of talking about plant medicines and ayahuasca mainly the whole time, but maybe you'd like to, I know you work with psilocybin as well, and maybe just explain a little bit about that and what that is exactly.
Yeah, so psilocybin is more commonly known as magic mushrooms, and it seems to be it's the plant medicine that certainly is getting a lot of traction from a legalization perspective. And generally speaking, that's synthetic psilocybin, right? So as is the norm in the West, we have to find the silver bullet molecule.
Yeah.
I mean,
try and take it out and make loads of money.
You're not going to believe this. I read there's an article that's just come out. Peter Thiel, who's from PayPal, he's launched this company that's he's backing a company that's doing synthetic psilocybin, and they've tried to patent a plant medicine journey while holding someone's hand and in a room with curtains. And you're like, what are you talking about? You're trying to patent holding someone's hand? Like, this is real. Like, he's actually tried to say, like, we're going to try and patent holding someone's hand while doing a plant medicine therapy. It's like, wow. I have an idea. I have an idea of what might help you.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's a lot, like there's a ton of capitalistic energy moving into this space at the moment. But, ultimately, how all this stuff unfolds, like some people are super worried and like fearful and out there trying to tell the world, no, this is how the psychedelic industry needs to unfold, and like up on their high horse. And I look at it very differently. I think, like you said a minute ago, I'm more optimistic in that regard, in the sense that things will unfold as they're meant to. And yes, of course, there's a whole bunch of capitalistic interest plowing in, but that's going to plateau, and people are going to find themselves, reaching a certain point, and then people are going to go find experiences that are even more beneficial. So I think it's totally fine. And, if we have to have the conversation again of, psychedelics versus not psychedelics is the conversation we're having now. If we have to have another conversation, which is synthetic versus natural, fine. We'll have that conversation when we need to have it.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I'm the optimist as well, and I'm like, no, I have the faith. And even I think there's been huge shifts over the last year as well. And I think, although it may be still slow, there's a lot of people waking up to actually some of the hidden agendas that are going on, beginning that question of, is there something else? Am I missing something? You're like, what else is here? And, I'm not into conspiracy theories or anything like that, but it's like, there have been a lot of vested interests, even when you look into, and I'm not against Western medicine or anything like that. It is hugely beneficial, but I see it as an interventional medicine more than anything, and like a life-saving, whereas a lot of the issues that we're facing are chronic lifestyle issues, and they build over a long time. Yeah. And I think looking at any, you have a heart doctor and a knee doctor and an ear doctor, but it's one body and it's a whole system, and we can't just look at one part because it has a knock-on effect. So there needs to be that bigger communication and holistic approach, because like that, or it's, polypharmacy as well. You start taking one pill and then you have to take another pill because of the side effect of the other pill. And next thing you've got 20 pills. And, somewhere along the line, you just have to be like, hang on a second. Like, really? What is going on? Yeah. And like you mentioned, it's trying to extract molecules, from nature to put them in a patent to make money. But that's a whole other conversation. But to end, maybe... What is your, speaking of like faith and vision and that, what would be your vision for the future, say with the likes of psychedelics, with psilocybin, with healthcare, with mental health, with the transitions that are going on in the world? What would be, and corporate climate and everything, what would be your vision of it all?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of convergence that's going to happen over the decade ahead. I think there's, some of the clinical trials that are starting now with plant medicine are incredible. I mean, they're doing so many different things, autoimmune disorders, stroke victims. The list just goes on and on and on. And so it's, again, coming back to that term silver bullet, I don't think it's that, but it is I think it's going to help us see that a lot of disease is actually of the mind. And as you say, it's not necessarily the case that the way that we've been living is in our interests, and it's been pushed for such a long time that I think people, as you say, are waking up. And so I think the future is going to be much more, holistic in terms of people reclaiming their ownership for their health outcomes and being far more conscious about what they're consuming, whether that's media or food or, pharmacological solutions, and really trying to, reestablish the connections between mind, body, heart, and soul, between themselves and, often the broken relationships that people have around them, and of course the natural world. So it's a very exciting time to be alive. And I think a lot of what we're seeing just in these last few months is really transcendence, right? We see the anchoring of a transcendent currency or a set of currencies in crypto. We see Starlink from Elon Musk now. Internet's going to transcend countries. We're going to see all sorts of these technologies that are coming out. Governments are not going to have a role to play, in my mind. They're just really not. So it's going to be an interesting transition, but it's going to happen fast.
Yes, it's absolutely, I agree. It's certainly exciting times. And, like you mentioned as well, and I think the word that ties it all in again is consciousness. It is coming back to more consciousness, that connection with ourselves, and realizing that we are in relationship with everything, whether it's another person, whether it's the foods, whether it's what we're watching or reading, and making it a more conscious connection. And like you say, the natural world as well, and what we've been doing, thinking that we can just destroy and plunder and there's no effects. So I think it is like the great wake up and shake up. And yes, it's messy, and yes, it can be difficult, but ultimately it's what needs to happen as well they say we're on the way to we're in the age of Aquarius, but we're on the way to the next golden age, which they say the vibrations will be even higher than Atlantean times. So, and that's within the next 12 years. So, it takes the going within like that, whether it's plant medicine, whether it's whatever, looking at our subconscious patterns and kind of cleaning that gunk out and coming back, like you say, into that whole connection of mind, body, heart and soul, and living that way in collaboration, in connection with everyone. So I absolutely love it, and what a high note to finish the conversation on. But please as well, if there's anything else coming up that you feel you want to share, and please also share as well where people can find out more about your work.
Yeah, sure. So you can find us on Behold Retreats website, all the normal social media platforms, and always happy to have a chat to see if we're a good fit for one another. Thank you so much, Karen, for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and like that, it was a conversation I've wanted to have for a while around plant medicines, but the alignment didn't happen until now. But thank you so much, and keep going, keep shining that light.
Beautiful. You too, Karen.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get notified every time a new show is released. Get more information on this week's guest as well on my website, www.soulpowerlight.com.